it's it's human nature to be upset about a scandal such as what's happening in Minnesota. Um, it really isn't right. It isn't right to lie. I mean, we say that as Christians. It's just not right to lie, but to lie on such a grand scale, that's called fraud. And why are we just blaming the people who were benefiting out in the open? What about the people that were enabling this fraud? And many of these people were born right here in America, and many of these people were white. So, as a Christian, I just have to say, it really isn't fair that the whole world would have a horrible impression of people from Somalia. Because the people that I knew from Somalia, whom I became acquainted with, were good, decent, nice, kind, competent people. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody from any country is good just because I said that the people that I knew from Somalia. I can share my story if you don't mind. After my mother died, my father had health problems. He had always been a strong, vigorous, intelligent person. But unfortunately, what runs in the family, dementia, this is the primary reason why he couldn't stay by himself. He couldn't live by himself. And so he came to live with us, even though we have a small house. We had a lot of kids and a small house. And when we learned that there was the option through his former military service for him to be able to attend an adult daycare, I want to tell you that was a blessing and a godsend to us. The first time that they came to pick him up for the daycare, my dad was afraid, so I actually had to ride with him in the van. I remember that day so well. And this was a commute, and the lady who was driving, she's a really good driver. What a stressful job, to take care of elderly people and people who have cognitive issues. I marveled at the professionalism of this woman. I marveled at the professionalism of the whole organization. I didn't have to ask, are you from Somalia? You kind of know when somebody's from Somalia. I don't want to be nosy, The daycare, when I walked in there, it was beautiful. It was clean. It was tidy. It smelled wonderful. It was well organized. The man I'm not sure where the man who seemed to be running it, what country he might have been from, but he was very kind, very professional. And really the thing that was kind of the deal breaker for Dad was his health issues increased and his dementia increased, even though we were taking him to these different doctors. And it's another scandal that we have in America. If nobody wants to talk about it, fine. I might be the lone voice crying in the wilderness. But these facilities for people who have dementia and memory issues are so expensive. The average person cannot afford it. Unfortunately, even though my father had done military service, he didn't qualify to go into a government-sponsored home for veterans because he had not actually been in combat. So he's sort of one of those people that fell through the cracks, and I feel bad for him because he served in the military bravely. He went to the most difficult branch of the military, which of course was the Marines. It was the few, the proud, the Marines. I guess he wanted to go into the toughest branch of the military, or for some reason, somebody persuaded him, this is what you do. And to give you some background, my father's parents were immigrants, and during World War II, that must have been difficult because they were German. Germans living in America, and Germany was our enemy. I have to sort of say, yes, they identified as Germans, but they were Germans living in... I found out there have been Germans living in Russia, Germans living in Ukraine. There's different subgroups of Germans, but they identified very strongly as Germans during World War II. There they are, but they lived in a city with many other immigrants, so they didn't... I don't believe they experienced a lot of discrimination. But how difficult that must be when you have this loyalty to your homeland, and they're our enemy. They're killing us, and we have to kill them. Terrible. All except... All right, I have to say two. Two of my grandmother's sons went into the military because they were capable of serving. One of her sons had polio when he was young, so he wouldn't have gone into the military, as I'm thinking about this. But anyway, I digress. They honored my father on Veterans Day. If there was any holiday having to do with veterans at this daycare center for adults, which employed Somalis, they honored, they showed such respect and such honor to everybody that was there. But I'm very grateful that they were there for my father when Americans said, well, if you want your father to have a good life, basically, this is what they said. They said, well, you have to liquidate all the assets, and then when he runs out of money, then he'll be able to live here for free with government funding. And these are Americans saying that. And I don't believe that my father wanted to do that. But again, here I am, it's just so easy to point fingers of blame at other people and dogpile on them. And I'm not saying the scandal in Minnesota ought not to be uncovered. Somebody's encouraging people to do this. There has to be somebody saying, yeah, this is what you have to do. And this is... Because people just... Nobody's a fraud. Only the fraud genius is the fraud genius. Everybody else just goes along with it. As P.T. Barnum, the famous founder of our American circus, said, there's a sucker board every minute. P.T. Barnum ran the organization. Who's the P.T. Barnum, or who are the P.T. Barnums involved here? Why blame just the people? Hey, you know what? You have to do this. This is what we do, but again, maybe I'm sounding vague. It's just so easy to judge other people. And I have to say, I'm being completely honest. If you just want to boo and hiss, I'm turning this off. I don't believe this. It's just that the fraud became so flagrant out in Minnesota, it had to be exposed. But I live in a different state. And it does have a significant number of Somalians. And I'm not a person who's just going to go start investigating them. That's not my job. My job as a Christian is to speak the truth and say, please don't just view everybody a certain way. We need to judge people by their individual actions, behaviors, and not every community is the same. If things are not being done properly, then that needs to be stopped, and people do need to be held accountable. But just to disparage the character of an entire nationality, it's like saying all Americans are bad because so-and-so is bad, therefore all Americans are bad. That's a logical fallacy. So I have no agenda here other than fairness, truth, and Christian love. If you'll accept that from me, I appreciate what you did for my father. And I think we all ought to have an identity as, if we're here, we're Americans. We're not living back in our home country. But when I was growing up, oh, Germany, we're German, we're not American, blah, 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 blah. The grandparents, if they come over, if they step off the boat, they have this love for their homeland, but that's not supposed to endure forever. Somebody once said it takes 3 generations to make an American. You have to really be acclimated to society and culture and not have this attitude of, well, it's us. And you know what? People from Somalia are not the only ethnic group. If you want to say ethnic group, if you want to say nationality, I'm not sure which term is more appropriate. They're not the only ones with this us and them mentality. What about the white people from Eastern Europe that come over and they're just, I'm special, this is our group. And some of them seem to be prospering quite well. And how do you just come over here and just suddenly you have all this money and you're just wealthy? Huh? There are other people working the system. It's just that they were so flagrant about it out in Minnesota. Let's put a stop to this abuse of Americans and American goodwill. But it starts with a change of heart, not with a change of governmental policy. The change of heart has to occur first. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.